and we'll see. Okay, so it's my pleasure to start our second meeting in the forum of Poland-Panama Academic Forum. It's my pleasure to be here with you and see so many people interested in this academic forum and with our talks. I can see Professor Jan Cooper from the University of Panama. It's my pleasure to see you again. I can see that you may have some problems with microphone, but if you are able to say hello to us, we will be delighted. Professor Jan Cooper, ¿tiene usted la posibilidad de hablar?
Hola, voy a intentarlo. Buenos días, profesora Johanna. Un placer nuevamente. Estamos en contacto. Lamentablemente no voy a poder acompañarlo mucho tiempo, pero quiero nuevamente felicitarlos por esta iniciativa, felicitar a los estudiantes de la Universidad de Varsovia, a sus profesoras, a mis estudiantes de la Escuela de Relaciones Internacionales que están también en contacto. Creo que es un gran avance que hemos logrado a través de la tecnología, esta interacción entre estudiantes de diversas universidades, de tan lejos geográficamente, pero tan cerca en nuestras aspiraciones y nuestro deseo de compartir experiencias, culturas, etcétera. Así que, profesora, realmente muy agradecido por su gestión y felicitaciones a todos los estudiantes que están participando.
Muchísimas gracias, profesor. Espero que seguimos la semana que viene con el acuerdo, ¿sí? Entre nuestras universidades. Estamos en contacto, ¿sí? Voy a mandarle un mensaje sobre eso. Y ahora es tiempo para hablar sobre transportaciones. Entonces cambiamos a inglés. Gracias, profesor, por su presencia. Sí, ahora damos la posibilidad de hablar a los estudiantes. Gracias. And so now we start the meeting. I give the microphone the possibility to talk to my students. So maybe this time when Mr. Jan Paradowski will start the presentation about the Polish part of the topic, and then we'll have the presentation of the Panamanian part, and then we have the forum to talk. So Mr. Jan Paradowski, time for you.
Okay, I would like to thank everybody for their attendance, and right now I will start with the presentation. Hopefully it will work correctly. Although I cannot share the screen.
You should have the possibility now. Just check
okay. It. Yes. You can inform me if it is not working correctly, but I think it will work. So, okay, right now. So I would like to begin discussing briefly transportation in Poland. This was a topic that's in a very organic way emerged during the discussion during our previous meeting. Obviously, given the fact that I'm a student of political sciences, there will be a lot of political content underlying that. Now, I will start with the topic that's most related to Panama as a isthmus country, País del Istmo. So sea transportation, we only have access to one sea, which is the Baltic Sea, and throughout Poland's history, for example, in the interior period, the access to the sea was quite limited. In the interwar period, Poland, practically speaking, didn't have any harbors and seaports. So Gdynia was developed in that at that time, and it is right now a relatively big city, one of the 4 main seaports and harbors. The other ones, Gdańsk, Świnoujście, and Police, were German. Gdańsk wasn't really German; it was a free city with a very specific status, and Świnoujście and Police are lands in the very west of Poland that were regained after World War II. Firstly speaking, sea transportation is very important. The shipment of fuels, liquid, chemical substances, since Poland has a very well-developed chemical processing industry, in shipping coal, a very important export. Poland historically, containers, and we have previously discussed, as Dorota mentioned, the importance of Poland and transportation and logistics. So this is another reason why Poland's access to the sea is very vital. Poland also has a very strong and important shipyard sector, the biggest one in Eastern Europe, and provides around 10% of shipyard production in all of Europe. And shipyards have been historically important in Poland due to the fact that in the socialist period, the shipyard workers were some of the most militant proletarians in Poland, and they participated in the 1970 and 1980 strikes. In 1981, they formed the Solidarity Union at that time, a left-wing union opposing the socialist communist government. In terms of civilian transport, Poles don't go on luxurious cruises like, for example, American tourists, since Polish civilian sea transport is limited to ferries to Sweden and Finland. Sweden, for example, a country where there's a fair amount of Polish immigrants. So sea transportation for civilians is limited, and for passengers is limited due to the very small size of the Baltic Sea. It is practically a very big lake. This is the legendary Gdańsk shipyard where the Solidarność trade union was born. It was in poor conditions, for example, the 90s because of the 80s crisis, but right now it's both a tourist attraction and it has both been revitalized, and some very important, some very big and crucial ships were made in that shipyard. Now, inland transportation through ships isn't that important. It is relatively well developed because Poland has large rivers like Vistula River, which goes through Kraków and Warsaw to the Baltic Sea, Oder or Warta. Before the appearance of rail transport, so very historically, they were very important for freight. But right now it's mainly passenger transport between certain areas, like areas where there's larger lakes, for example, Pomerania, Mazuria, so sort of northern Poland, and for tourism. In Warsaw, for example, there's many sort of small tourist ships sailing the Vistula River. And now a very important thing, and what will emerge as a big difference between Poland and Panama and Latin America in general, rail transport. It appeared in Poland relatively early, in the middle of the 19th century. It mainly served the need of Poland's partitioners, so those 3 countries that divided Poland in the late 18th century, Austria-Hungary, Tsarist Russia, and the German Reich, Prussia. These countries expanded rail for the purpose of transporting capital for industries that were being developed in Poland. It has to be remembered that, for example, in Tsarist Russia, Poland was the most industrialized area. So Poland relatively quickly had railways. They weren't obviously for passenger use, mainly also because people simply couldn't afford that. And before World War I began, Poland had what is currently Poland, or later became Poland in the interwar period, had a relatively decent railway connection. However, after World War I, there were problems, firstly, with connecting different Polish railway tracks because they had different width. So that was a big problem in the interwar period. And rebuilding infrastructure after World War I and after the border conflicts, because Poland's borders weren't established in 1918 when Poland regained independence, but later. In the interwar period, an important thing happened, that is the creation of the Polskie Koleje Państwowe, the Polish state railways. But generally speaking, the poverty of the interwar era and World War II caused Polish rail transport to be relatively underdeveloped. Rail was popular in the socialist era because it was a collective means of transport, right? So it's sort of ideologically fit. And it was mainly expanded in the era of what is considered by historians the third industrialization of Poland in the 1970s. It was obviously debt-driven, but it has left behind some very important infrastructure or newer, faster trains. Obviously, in the 1980s and 1990s, the development of rails and railways decayed, especially after 1989, when Poland focused more on the automotive industry and car transport, which I will talk about later. And this has been a big problem. After Poland became part of the European Union, increased European Union funding and the sort of diminishment of the problems, economic problems that Poland had in the 80s and 90s, made it possible to develop much faster trains, and they're generally an increase in popularity. And for many older people, the fact that we can get from Warsaw to Kraków or Warsaw to Poznań in 3 hours by train is something shocking, since in the 90s or the 80s, this took them 2 times more. There's still very visible difference between the partitions of Poland and how railways are developed. And unfortunately, the state railways are still underfunded, and PKP, Polskie Koleje Państwowe, are the main topic of many running jokes. For example, many people laugh about how often Polish trains are late. Now, this is the Warsaw Central Railway Station, right next to Pałac Kultury i Nauki, the most important landmark of Warsaw. It's a flagship project of the Gierek era. Edward Gierek was the first secretary of the Communist Party. And he modernized Poland, but it was at the cost of debt. So something that is also, I think, understandable to our Latin American counterparts in Panama, debt-driven development. Now, this is the change in railway lines after capitalism was restored in Poland. As you can see, many lines have been shut down. Some were indeed in quite bad shape, and some were substituted by roads and highways. The former partitions are also visible. They're marked with the orange line. And you can see that in the former German part, which is the west, they are the most developed. This is the newest sensation of the Polish state railways, the fast Pendolino trains. They're indeed quite fast. They enable getting from Warsaw to the seaside, or from Warsaw to the south of Poland in 2.5, 3 hours, which is a huge improvement. And they're very comfortable, very clean. Now, networks and private car transport. The Polish network is very young and is growing very rapidly. Any real development, the Polish People's Republic, there's the socialist period, dates back to the 1970s once again. Poland has a well-developed automotive industry, one of the biggest ones in Europe, and in terms of Central or Eastern Europe, it is only short of the Czech one. And as we know, Czechs have, for example, the Skoda company. First investment in the automotive industry dates back to the interwar period, and in the socialist era, private cars were something considered something bourgeois and something unfit with the social model, and they were not also affordable until in the 1970s. Poland began constructing a license model of the Fiat 126, which became a legendary car. The fall of popularity of rail transport coincides with the increase of popularity of private cars and the development of such model of communication. So people switched from getting one place to another by rail, for example, the 70s, 80s, to getting from one place to another by car. And cars are still, I would say, a symbol of social status, but also a symbol of mobility and certain independence. On the other hand, there are also many cities of Poland face problems with traffic congestions, and not to mention the environmental cost and the toll that private vehicles have. Quite importantly, although Polish roads lag behind compared to the other roads in other European countries, Poland is like the second or third worst country in terms of road connection in the European Union. There's many new projects being undertaken, so that is improving. This is the Fiat 126 Maluch, assembled in the 1970s. It is said that technically it could fit 4 people, but Poles were able to fit 12, 15 people into that car. There was a saying in the 90s that Polak potrafi, a Pole can do things, and that's one of the symbols of that, fitting 12 people into this small car. And this is the change between the length of railways in railways in red, and in green, the length of roads. As you can see, the smaller rail connection is amounted for thanks to larger road connections. Now, public transport, this is another important thing. The bigger the city, the better the situation. The prime example of that being Warsaw. It has 2 modern metro lines, so like Panama, and numerous public buses, with the city being well connected and there being a bus stop in every major on every major street. And there is also a tram system. Tram networks also exist in 15 other cities, and 3 cities in Poland, which aren't necessarily big ones, have trolley buses, so buses that are connected to an electricity line, so to speak. An important thing during the socialist era was the establishment of PKS, the state public transit enterprise, but it declined heavily after 1989. Many local divisions of PKS were decentralized, and many of them were very indebted or were cancelled. And because of that, there's a very pressing social issue, which I think will be mentioned during our future discussion. Transport-related exclusion, wykluczenie komunikacyjne, a very pressing social issue affecting roughly 30% of Poles. It consists not only in the fact that, for example, a small village doesn't have any bus line going to it or any public train that stops in that small village, but also the fact that, for example, many bus lines come into that place only once in an hour, for example, or generally speaking, the infrastructure is poorly equipped, the buses or the trains are old. It's a big issue still, especially if somebody doesn't have a car, and not everyone either has a driver's license or can afford it or can afford maintaining it, especially in rural Poland. Now, this is the Warsaw Metro. It's very reliable. It's very clean compared to the underground transit in numerous European cities. It is exceptionally clean, and it's still expanding. There's plans for a third line. So that's a very positive thing. But also, you can see a long dilapidated bus stop. It's something very common in Polish rural areas, especially areas that decayed more after the fall of socialism. And it's a very sad sight, and unfortunately, there's still much investment needed in that. Aviation in Poland. Now, it is also underdeveloped, and it's most importantly centered around one place, one airport, the Warsaw Chopin Airport, and one airline, Lot Polish Airlines. It's a state-owned company that's nearly 100 years old. In the recent years, after Poland joined the European Union, low-fare airlines like the Irish Ryanair and the Hungarian Wizz Air became very popular in Poland. The Warsaw Chopin Airport itself amounts for more than 1/3 of passenger traffic in Poland. It is the only civilian airport with 2 runways, and it is located close to the city center, which may sound as a good thing, but it really is not. Some people, for example, prefer to travel from Germany and from Czechia, for example, from Prague or from Berlin, especially if they live close to the border. because there's a mediocre availability of connections, so to speak, especially from smaller airports, like the big cities like Kraków, Katowice, Poznań, the three cities of Gdańsk, Gdynia, Sopot, next to the seaside. They do have their own airports, but they usually have a few connections available. Anecdotically speaking, there's no direct connection to Panama. As of now, hopefully it will change. There's also heated debate, to finish things off. Hopefully I have not run out of time, around a central communication port, Centralny Port Komunikacyjny, which is meant to be built in the center of Poland, some 1.5 hour drive west from Warsaw, closer to the city of Łódź. But the current government, it's a very neoliberal government. So once again, something much known to our Panamanian counterparts, is trying poor initiative to undertake that. It's calling this project a mega investment, which cannot be afforded and things like that. And there was a very heated debate around that. Many people were very engaged into that topic of building that airport. Finally, the government agreed to do that. Now we will see how this will develop, because once again, the Chopin airport cannot expand. Why? Well, here's a picture of two LOT Polish airline Dreamliners. And here, there are the Chopin airport. Here in the back, you can see the center of Warsaw, right? The planes in that airport start and land over the heads and the apartments of people. And there's problems with the airport generating too much noise for people living around that area, not to mention the fact that you don't even have space for another terminal at that airport, let alone another runway, because it's quite close to the city center indeed, and it's surrounded by residential areas. So that is a big problem. It is impossible to expand that airport. It is in good shape, I would say, but it's just limited. So those are, briefly speaking, the issues at hand in Poland in terms of transportation. But there have been changes, generally speaking, especially after World War II, where during the socialist era and right now in the Third Polish Republic, the development of our country in general has been the most visible. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. Hopefully this presentation was correct on the technical level as well, and everything was shown here. And we obviously invite you to the discussion after the Panamanian presentation as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think we could do like last time, wait for the end for the questions. You're muted.
Okay, I hope that now you have the possibility to show the presentation. Just check it.
Yeah, yes, I can.
Okay, so go on.
A moment. Okay. Wait, I was gonna sneeze. Okay, well, I'm gonna begin. This is a presentation about the transportation systems in Panama. Now, as you may know, Panama. Oh. Am I still here? I stopped.
Yeah, we can't see the presentation. I mean, at least I can't.
Yeah.
I also cannot see anything.
I'm gonna.
Okay, so try again to show the presentation. Just.
Can you see it now?
Oh. No, please try again. Something happened.
Could I send it to one of you so you can present it? I think it's my device that's having problems.
Okay, so maybe you will just, okay, but I think that we can see something right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Can you
well,
see the presentation now?
it
Now
should
it's
work.
okay.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
can see it, so
Mhm.
I hope it
Okay.
should work.
Well. Oh, all right. Let's hope. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's really a very nice experience to be able to tell you all about the transportation systems of Panama, seeing as that's one of the main topics surrounding my country. To begin, I'm going to start with a little historical briefing of the roots. Since the colonial period of Panama, and even before that, the Isthmus of Panama has been a main trade route for international travel and commerce. Originally, the Panama Canal wasn't the big wide canal it is now, capable of supporting international travel and big boats. It was just a very narrow natural passageway, but it was still the narrowest point of the continent. So even before the Spanish arrived here, the pre-Columbian peoples of the Americas used it as a trade route, mainly for the trade of gold from the South American empires and Mesoamerican economies. Well, starting from the 17th and 18th centuries, the first of Portobello were held in the city of Portobello in the province of Colón in the Caribbean coast of the country. These were very big annual events that facilitated the commerce between mainland Europe and the Americas. During this time, the merchandise and the people were transferred over to the southern coast of Panama in the Pacific coast through two main roads that were traveled by foot by animals like horses or donkeys and carts. These are the main roads I have here. In blue, we can see the Camino de Cruces, or Road of Crosses in English, and in red, we can see Camino Real, Royal Road. These were the main ones that connected the ports of the Caribbean coast with the mainland cities that developed in the other coast of the country, seeing as they were more protected from invaders and any sort of attacks due to how far away it was from typical pirates and illegal activities. Starting from around the 1800s, the United States established itself in Panama through mainly private enterprises. Around the 1950s, the Panama Canal Railway was constructed. It was a private-owned company made for specifically facilitating the travel and the transport of merchandise and people, but mainly merchandise from each coast of the country. These were very relevant during the time, seeing as in North America, there was happening the California Gold Rush, and it was a much easier and quicker passage for travelers going from one coast to the other, instead of having to travel across the continental mainland. The Panama Canal was constructed during these times, and in 1903, when Panama established itself as an independent republic, the United States also made an agreement with Panama to begin construction of the canal officially. The canal was inaugurated on 1914. It was a strategic route for international transit and commerce. Of course, we see it today as one of the main commercial routes in the world. Almost 8% of the entirety of the world's commerce and international trade travels through the Panama Canal. the strategic importance of this route is because of how short and quick it is. One ship can go across the whole country from Caribbean to Pacific in less than a day. It's around 8 to 10 hours, depending on the type of ship. Well, since the 1903 independence of Panama, the United States also established what's known as the Panama Canal Zone. The Canal Zone was, for all intents and purposes, a United States colony in the middle of the country that surrounded 5 miles on each side of the canal. This was because they were the ones that constructed it and the ones that took the main economic benefits from the project. In 1999, through the Torrijos-Carter treaties, the canal's management was transferred over to the Panamanian government and the Panamanian people. And since then, Panama has been managing all affairs relating to the canal. Now, having established that Panama is a very important maritime travel route, here we can see a map of most of Panama's portuary system. As you can see, it's a lot. We have both coasts completely covered in ports and mainly around the Panama Canal, around the middle. And the state-owned ports are fewer than the private-owned ports, but they are both very important because they receive most of international commerce and manage the logistics of traveling through the canal by ship or landing on Panama and traveling through the whole continent by terrestrial means, mostly from the logistic hub that is Panama, and through the Pan American Highway. The main ports of Panama are the Port of Balboa in the capital city. It's located in the Pacific coast of the country. Then we can see the Panama International Terminal in Colon at the north of the country, Manzanillo International Terminal also in Colon, Port of Cristobal also in Colon, and Colon Container Terminal. These are all mainly located in Colon because there is located also the Colon Free Trade Zone, which is a duty-free special economic area designated for facilitating and incentivizing the establishment of international commerce in the region and in the country. For a fun fact, a lot of these commercial ports have been constructed on top of old American naval bases, seeing as the United States stayed in Panama for almost 100 years. We can see here some of the roads that cross across Panama. The whole continent of the Americas is connected through Panama, and Europe and Asia have a faster method of transportation through here than going all the way from the border of the old continent. Now, as for the airports, Panama also is a travel hub for international aerial travel. We have our main international airport, that is Stockholm International Airport. It is located in the capital city, but further to the outsides of the city. It recently, in 2019, opened a new terminal that allows for bigger airships to travel, to land here, and to take off. And also it is the flow of passengers that come to through Panama, seeing as this year alone, in the 7 months that we have, more than 7 million people traveled through this airport alone, be it for travel to another country or to stay in Panama. The airport is also one of the best ranking airports in the region, and is one of the few that's capable of supporting the biggest airships in commercial use. Then we have the Marcos Galvez International Airport. It is mainly for domestic flights. It's located near the Canal Administration Building and the Port of Balboa, so it's much faster for private airplanes to travel here, especially for enterprises and very economically powerful people. The Enrique Jimenez International Airport is located in Colón, right beside the Colón duty-free zone. It is mainly for international travel, also located on top of an old USA military base. The Panama Pacific International Airport is located on the other side of the canal, in the province of West Panama. It is located right beside a special economic area called Panama Pacific, where the humanitarian aid hub and the logistics hubs are located. A lot of international organizations and NGOs are located in this region. And lastly, we have the Enrique Malek International Airport, located on the other side of the country in the province of Chiriquí, which is right beside the border with Costa Rica. Here we can see a map of where they are. As you can see, the middle section of the country is very much empty of airports. This is because the main economic hubs developed around the canal and the border with Costa Rica. In a moment, we're gonna see exactly why not the same thing happened in the Darien region in the east. And that's because of the Darien Gap, which I'm gonna explain further on. Now, going on to the terrestrial transport. Panama mainly developed around the main Balboa port in the capital city. Seeing as American influence was established in Panama since our creation, the city didn't develop in the more organic kind of circular way that most cities around the world are. We developed mainly following the coast and the canal zone. So it's very much two large strips going in a straight line, basically. Here we can see that, okay, this is the Pacific coast of Panama. This is the Panama Bay Area. The main roads that developed the economy and demographics of Panama City were the Simón Bolívar Avenue, commonly known as Transísmica, which is the one in the circle number 1. It connects the country from the capital city up all the way up to Colón. It goes straight into the ports that I mentioned earlier. This was for a long time the main roads that could be used to travel by car from one side to the other, seeing as most of the territory west of there was United States occupied territory. So Panamanians didn't really have the liberty of going freely into that area of the country. On number 2, we have the Ricardo Hotel Faro Avenue, commonly known as Tumba Muerto. It developed mainly the local economic development. There, most of the Panamanian businesses and international businesses that established around this road because it was the one that connected the farthest away from the coastal area while still maintaining a relatively close distance. This isn't really very big. Panama's a very small country and the city is also very small. But as you can see, it's very well connected. And lastly, we have the Vía España. This road was built specifically to go across the financial center of Panama City. There are a lot of international banks and the administration of a lot of the portuary enterprises established. Right now, we still have that area designated as the more developed area of the whole country, really. It's full of skyscrapers, and that's the part that most people see when they look up pictures of Panama, or when they arrive, they see, oh, this looks like a very different country, a very different city. It's mainly around that area. I don't mention it here, but the Panama City didn't really look like this for most of our history. These are pretty recent developments. Besides the roads I just mentioned, the country for a lot of time was divided by the Canal zone, so that halted a lot of economic development and transit from people from one side of the country to the other. Once the canal was transferred over to Panama in the year 2000, functionally, we started developing very fast our road systems. And as you can see in the map, the red and blue arrows show the main highways that connect Panama City as a whole, all the way to the farthest parts of what's still considered city and not countryside. Here we can also see a map of the Panama Canal Railway. It's the line in yellow. The line in red is the traditional Transismic Avenue, and the line in purple is a pretty recent development. It's the Panama-Poland Highway. It was made specifically for facilitating the travel of mainly trucks, for easing the process of the logistics of transporting merchandise from one coast to the other. Now, in Panama, most people use cars for their main method of transport, but in the year 2014, the Metro of Panama was inaugurated. It is a complex line system of lines with the metro as pictured here. They're still in development. They have currently 2 lines. The line number 1 has 14 stations going from the capital mainly. The line 2 goes from the capital to all the way to the Tocumen International Airport. Right now, there's a station. You can come to Panama and right from the airport, take the metro and go straight to the center of the city. It's really a very important development for the transport infrastructure of the country, seeing as we typically didn't have public methods of transport. It was very much a car-centric society. It still is, but we're trying to transition into a more sustainable kind of way. Right now, there are plans to make a line of the metro that goes across the Panama Canal. It's apparently gonna go beneath the canal and connect the provinces of Panama, where the capital is, to the West Panama province, which is one of the highest fastest growing population centers in the country right now. Here we can see the master plan of the metro lines. Currently, we only have the lines in red and green. As you can see, it ends in the green one ends in the airport, in the Tocumen International Airport. Okay, we have 3 main bridges over the canal. The first one, the Bridge of the Americas, was inaugurated in 1962. It became the first permanent bridge to cross over the Panama Canal. It greatly facilitated the transport of most everything in the continent. It also was the first time that the Americas were truly connected by terrestrial means, seeing as the Pan American Highway goes across it and later on it crosses also into the Centennial Bridge. But it was the first time the continent was connected in a straight, uninterrupted line, except for the Darien Gap. The Centennial Bridge was inaugurated in 2004 for the 100th anniversary of the Republic of Panama. It also greatly eased the traffic jams that happen between Panama and West Panama, seeing as I just mentioned, it's one of the fastest growing population centers in the country, and a lot of people travel from there, where they live mainly, to the economic center that is the capital. And it's very much, it's kind of inefficient, but we're trying to implement new ways to ease the toll it takes on the economy and the infrastructure itself. Lastly, we have the Atlantic Bridge. It is located in the Canal province in the north of the country. It's mainly used for transportation of cargo trucks going from the many ports located near the Caribbean coast of the country. It's very recent. It was inaugurated in 2019. It's not very used for civilian travel. It's mainly used for logistics. Okay, lastly, we have the Pan American Highway. I've mentioned it a lot, but just in case that you don't know, the Pan American Highway is a 30,000 kilometer continuous road that crosses the whole continent of America from north to south. It goes from the very tip of Alaska to the very bottom of Argentina. It's commonly known here in Panama as Interamericana, the Interamerican Highway. The highway facilitates the transit of merchandise and of people across the whole continent through a very complex system of subsidiary roads that go across all of the countries in the Americas. It was mainly, it was originally made as a solution for North American travel, mainly between the United States and Mexico. It was, the idea developed around the 1900s, well, the 1800s, I'm sorry. And in the 1920s, it started construction in North America and slowly made its way down the continent. In Panama, as you can see in the little box at the side, in Panama, because of the Darien Gap, that is a very dense, ancient jungle, the construction couldn't be finished and they abandoned the project, opting out for better methods, which in the end became the ending of the North American side of the Pan American Highway ends in the region of Yavisa in Panama, in Darien. And then from there, you have to take a ferry to cross over into the Colombian side, into Turbo, where you continue the straight line down the continent. It is a keystone infrastructure project in the economy of the Americas and the world, really. 70% of the economic activity in the whole continent is possible due to or relies directly on the highway's international transit. During the last years, Panama had a rise of protests due to a topic that's highly debated here in the country. And one of the ways that people manifested their discomfort was by closing off the Pan American Highway. This greatly discomforted a lot of economists and enterprises and portuary systems, because it just a few hours of disruption of the road cost around $20 million in damages, which happened due to the interruption of the supply chain. So It's a very important road that not a lot of people take into account when talking about transport. We mainly focus on the international maritime travel and commerce, but once it's here in the continent, it's very, very complex the way that it gets distributed by land. Well, that is all. Thank you for listening. I hope I didn't take over my time. I'm gonna stop presenting.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. And right now I will try to moderate our discussion after presentations. Okay, so maybe we'll start with our, let's say, Polish side, to mix a little bit. And so do we have any questions from our Polish side to our friends in Panama, or maybe you want to comment something or ask about something? It's the best time for it.
Yes, I have a question for our Panamanian friends. When, let's say, you want to go to the next town, next city, or visit someone, what is the easiest way to do it?
Okay, mainly by car. It's the main method of transportation here in Panama. And also although we have a very recent developments in the infrastructure of transport, it's still not very we still have way too many cars for the amount of people that live here. So it's very inefficient. It doesn't, as I showed in the maps, it doesn't go across the whole country. It goes only across the capital city, because that's where the economy developed, mainly due to the international commerce aspect of it. But if you want to visit a relative, say in the middle provinces, I don't know how to say that in English. Interior, we call it here. Yeah, the countryside. If you want to visit a relative or go there, you can go by car. It's relatively fast, actually. You can go from one border of Panama to the other, from Costa Rica to Colombia, in under a day, really, if you go uninterrupted. But due to the traffic jams, it's usually more. So I hope that answered your question.
But if you don't have a car or can't afford it?
Okay, there's also in Panama, the main method of public transport, if you don't have a car, is by buses. I didn't mention it in the presentation. I kind of forgot, but now that you mention it, it's also very complex. Having the Pan American Highway going across the whole country, we developed a very kind of easy way to travel from one side to the other by mainly what are known as pickup buses. They are the buses that cross through the whole of Central America up to North America. That's one type of bus that you can take. They're relatively economic, and you can take them mainly from the Albrook terminal. That's where the metro, as it is right now, ends, and where it will in the future connect to the third line of the project. It's also where most of the buses from Central America end their journey, and that's pretty much one of the easiest ways to do that. I hope.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay, I think that we are asking about it because, well, we thought about going to the Portobello when we were in Panama, and, well, the Chartes affair from Poland, well, she said that if we don't have a car, it's not so easy to travel, to another city. And, well, of course, we didn't have a car, but still for us, it's a little bit, let's say, maybe surprising, that, well, this public transport is not so developed. Well, I mean that in Poland, maybe at countryside, yes, we can see the problem of public transport and so on, but still, you know, it is possible to do it. But I'm afraid that in Panama, it's not so easy, or maybe even sometimes it's not possible. Okay, I can see that Andrea wants to say something because, well, I can see her
Yes.
hand, let's say.
Thank you. Yes, precisely. Now that you mentioned the part about the countryside, I was going to ask that about Poland because precisely we have that problem in Panama. Amber did mention how important the Tika buses are in Panama. We also have the expressos that are used to mostly go from Panama to Veraguas and Chiriquí, which are two important provinces in the countryside. However, to travel within the countryside, we usually use taxis or like taxi, right? We use mostly that, or people who go on horse road also use horses or their own cars. But I wanted to know how the development of the countryside in Poland worked in that matter. Because, for example, you may have buses, or is it preferred to use another type of transportation? How important is for Poland its countryside? It's kind of my question also.
Okay, Janek, maybe you want to say something about it?
In terms of the countryside, it is important to know that for our levels of development, Poland has a very low urbanization rate. Poland's urbanization rate peaked at 60%, roughly around the same time the population of Poland peaked, so the end of the socialist era, in the late 80s. And Poland has a high rural population. There's many people living in the rural areas, and there's many people who live of land, medium sort of landowners. So there's many people living in those areas. Many of those individual kind of agricultural producers, they're usually able to afford a car, and it's important for them. It's also important for them, even if they have, for example, some conferences and meetings of those people from that environment, they get there by car. But usually there is a problem that many rural areas are poorly connected to the bus lines. They used to be better connected during the socialist times. There's poor connection to train lines. For example, there is a train station, but the train, I don't know, the frequency of the stopping of the train is like 1 train per hour, things like that. Many of those lines were cancelled in the 1990s, for example, because they were not they're not rentable, basically. So yeah, the countryside is also, there's also a bit of a generational difference, because there's some older people who started their lives in the countryside and they have been living there, they haven't moved, and it's understandable. There's also so the countryside, I think, is important, but the appearance and the popularity of cars has changed that. And in the countryside, you will see that many people have, for example, 1 car per household. Yes, people have a house they build, for example, maybe from the money that they received from the company that they worked during the socialist times, or maybe they had a small business in the 90s and could afford it, whatever. And there's the focus on cars like that. There's also, we have to remember, richer people in the non-urban areas as well. And there's also richer people from urban areas that have, for example, a house in some village under the city. That's the rural population of Poland, so to speak. So it's mainly cars, small villages next to big cities. For example, all those small villages and smaller towns close to Warsaw, they're well connected. They're very well connected. But it's a mixed bag, to say the least. And we have a saying of Polska powiatowa, so the powiat Poland. Powiat is like a division, regional division. There's wojewodships like like the provinces of Panama, and there's powiaty, which are the lower division, and many of those like small powiaty, for example, southeast Poland or northwest, where there was collective farms in socialist times, they have that problem. It really depends. The problem is that Poland is a neoliberal country, and public spending for most of the last 35 years was relatively low. So also for public transport. So that's unfortunately a problem we have to face, and the current government is not helping in any of that because it is very much neoliberal. So same issues like Panama.
Thank you.
Yeah, and well, I think that maybe the difference between Panama and Poland in this case is that, well, in Poland sometimes it's complicated to get somewhere by bus or by train because, well, it takes a lot of time and things like this. But in the end, you can do it. But I am afraid that, for example, in Panama, if, for example, you don't have a car or, well, as you mentioned, you don't have a horse, for instance, you are not able to go somewhere. And I think that this is a really huge problem for you. And well, I mean that if you plan something well here in Poland, you can go somewhere. And maybe it's not easy, but at least it is possible. So for us, it's a huge difference when we compare it with Panama. And especially that, for example, if you want to go, as I said, that we wanted to go to Portobello, which actually is, let's say, a touristic place. And it wasn't easy to go there. And well, finally, we didn't go there. So, well, when you want to go to a touristic place in Poland, well, it's possible by bus or by train because, well, it is worth it to do it. So, well, I think that this is the biggest difference. Okay, so maybe we'll go to another question if we have some more question. If not, we can go on about those connections in the countryside. But maybe we have a question. Well, if somebody don't want to say it out loud, you can write it down on our chat and I will read it. But maybe somebody want to ask a question, like, let's say, using their voice.
But we were also told that it's not easy or it's not possible to go to Nowe Bugle, esta provincia, because it's the roads are not existent or are in a very bad state. Is it true?
Yes, unfortunately, that is true. Panama is a very geographically complex country. Although we're an isthmus and we're very much narrow, a lot of the country, mainly towards Central America, is very mountainous. And it's also very ancient virgin forests. So it's very difficult for infrastructure to be developed in regions like the how do they say comarcas, shires, I think, which are mainly where a lot of indigenous peoples live. Seeing as they also develop their ancestral history kind of isolated from the rest of Panamanian society. And as you may have noticed from how much I talked about the USA, the division of that the United States caused in the country is very palpable still. Most of Panamanian society developed around this idea of idealizing or seeing the United States or the American way as ideal or aspirational. And that also made an impact in people wanting to leave the old indigenous ways behind. A lot of people traveled to the capital because of the economic possibilities, and that also caused how do you say that? A lot of people migrated and stopped developing the economies of their original home places. And in places like Nuevo Ugle or Emeragunan, and the Darien side, a lot of these populations became very isolated because the people that left didn't really come back and didn't push for a better infrastructure for facilitating the travel. It's also because of this reason that's very difficult to reach a lot of communities with education, health, and a lot of other things. So that's also a thing that you may have noticed in Panama, sadly.
Okay, but I have another question because, well, in Poland right now, especially the, let's say, parties who are more like left, not central or right, they sometimes mention that here in Poland we have problems with this public transport in the countryside and things like this. And while right now this topic is, let's say, more common when we discuss about our country or what we can change in our country to make it a better place. And well, actually, how does it work works in Panama? Because, well, I want to know if the politicians are talking about it, or maybe they are just ignoring this topic and they don't see the problem.
Okay, well, the politicians definitely see the problem. It's very much impossible to see it, to not see how difficult it is for other people from West Panama to work and just live, because all the opportunities and the education, works, they're all in the capital. But the people are increasingly moving into the West Panama province. So there's been studies and people that call the province just a place where people go to sleep. They don't really live there because they spend most of their day in the capital. Right now, we recently installed a new government. The new president of the country is very heavily talking about implementing new roads, new methods of transportation. He's talking about a railway going from Panama all the way to Chiriquí. He's also pushing for the to make the third line of the metro faster to start now, because that would also really very much alleviate the traffic jams that happen in the bridges, mainly the Bridge of the Americas and the Centennial Bridge. There's also talks of a fourth bridge over the Canal. It's still not really solid how it's gonna go exactly, but on the other side, we do have the metro that's definitely advancing its development. It was during the elections a very heavy talking point, the topic of, well, to develop the whole country, not just the capital, to better the quality of life of citizens across the canal, not just here, which has happened sadly for a lot of decades. But yeah, it's definitely a thing that politicians are focusing on very heavily right now. And it looks like the country's gonna go in a more it's looking a lot at this topic, and a lot of people are very interested. So yeah.
Okay, I think that maybe Janek can say something more about it because, well, he's more, let's say, keen on those topics.
I don't know. I would also add to Dorota's, what Dorota said is that left-wing parties, well, there's one left-wing party in Poland and it's not very visible, and the traditional left-wing electorate has been gathered by a right-wing National Conservative Party, which indeed has the sort of left-leaning, some left-leaning economic stances. But Poland is like Panama, devoid of any left. So But this is another topic. But I would say that yes, and generally speaking, in a public debate, this has been mentioned, not perhaps by concrete subjective political forces, but generally there is much debate that if you go to the to some countryside area, many people will say that they have the problem, for example, that they live under stress because they only have one bus by which they can get to work. If they miss it, they appear late for work, things like that. You know, there's also problems, for example, that if that bus line or train doesn't appear because there is some malfunction, this is very problematic, right? It's not only about, you know, comfort, but it also has a direct economic effect, and there's a big strain. But I think in recent couple of years there has been some small development in that. But there has not been there hasn't been any, for example, intense program, or for example, there has been no political party whose main idea or main topic that they cover was, for example, to make Poland more, you know, rural Poland more accessible. Yes. And also, I think the fact that, for example, in many of those rural areas, people try to get by through getting a car, one car for the family, even if it's an old car, you know, as we joke, that a car that the German man was crying when he sold it, yeah, you know, something like that. It's also, I think, another important aspect of that, but that's something that's not that mentioned in Poland, but is a bit different in Panama because of the sheer difference between a place that is affected by climate change more directly, and also like the protest with the mine, is that cars are take a heavy toll on the environment. And cars also take a heavy toll on the urban areas because look at how much space they occupy, look at how much noise they generate, look how much smog they generate, and how much you know, emissions they generate. In Poland, Poland has a big problem with smog and the air quality. Poland has worse air quality than some Chinese cities and Mongolian cities. Not to offend those countries, but they are usually, you know, they have been historically much poorer areas, and that's the problem with cars with Poland. But also for many Polish people, it's still, I think, there's mentality that cars, you know, are a thing of social status. And there's also this running joke, for example, that the average Polish man usually gets very angry when his neighbor gets a better car, right? So that's also a bit of a social problem. And I personally think that, for example, the socialist era solution of focusing more on investing in public transport was much better, also because it was the social function of that. Not to get into too much detail, was also good because you know, going through public transport integrates many people in one area. Yeah, you can see different individuals from across different social strata, right? Cars are more sort of individualistic and isolating, and maybe it's a bit of a too deep philosophical implication, but generally speaking, cars, I think, in Poland are also problematic because they're a bit of an expression of sort of an overt individuality in Polish society, and something that you may not necessarily need a good car, but you want to show, for example, to your family when you appear at some cousin's wedding reception that, wow, you have a new car, right? And that's, you know, you're doing well. So it's like having a nice watch. I don't know, maybe I am cynical, but to me it's a bit, it's vain.
Yeah, I would like to mention something that I remembered when you were talking. In Panama, regarding the topic of the pollution that cars cause and a lot of methods of transport, in Panama, the discourse isn't really about the environment as much as it is about efficiency. Most politicians, the now president, spoke mainly of, we're gonna make this because it's gonna improve the economy, it's gonna improve your lives. It may damage a lot of virgin forest, but that doesn't matter. The economy will be all right. And that's a very interesting thing, considering that Panama, across the board, is a very clean in regards of a very clean country in regards of pollution. We don't really have as much pollution as other countries in the region. A lot of people call Panama City a very green city because there's a lot of untapped nature around. And despite that, the use of cars has been slowly increasing the amounts of pollution present in the main urban areas. There have been some improvements in regards to legislation, but it's a very complicated thing. Also, regarding the thing about having to brag or wanting to brag about having a car in Panama, it's not really. I don't think it's really that much of a brag. It's like, why don't you have a car? Everyone needs one. So that's a very interesting thing. I think it may have a lot to do with the American influence, because the United States is a very car-centric society and economy, and that definitely rubbed off on Panama. Unlike in, I assume, Poland, where you did develop a public transportation system, although complicated and kind of vast, you did develop it. Here, people didn't think about that. It wasn't as much the focus on improving the quality of life for the majority. It was like, everyone should have this. So we're gonna make society and the city just for cars. And even then, right now, the city is experiencing huge problems because the streets weren't made for the amount of cars that travel them today. That's also a very heavy topic. A lot of money goes into public offices that take care of the roads, which they don't really. That's why we have a lot of problems now. But that is a thing that I've noticed. It's very much a vestigial thing from the American occupation, because it's very much still an individualistic, I have a car, I can go anywhere kind of thing. But yeah.
Well, I think that here in Poland, it depends where do you live, because, well, for instance, if you live in Warsaw, let's say that you don't have to have a car, because, well, the city is, well, really well connected from another one part of the Warsaw to another. But for instance, when you live in the countryside or maybe in a smaller city, for example, I am from Bytom. It's maybe not small, but it's a city not as big as Warsaw. And, well, I will say that everybody at my, let's say, district, Śląsk, Silesia, well, we are using cars because we need it. Of course, the cities are connected to each other because, well, my region is like one really big city, but we have a lot of smaller cities inside. Maybe I will, well, it will be better if I will show it on the map, but it's not the topic for now. And, well, everybody, the Silesia use cars because, well, we need it, because the road from one city to another, well, just takes time. And I can see that Aldona has her hand up, and she is a city which is located near to my city, Bytom, because where she's from, Ruda, Śląska. So maybe I will just I will give her an opportunity to say something about it.
Yes, so it's true that it's easier to commune in Silesia by a car, but it's totally possible to do it without, because I lived my whole life without a car in my family. And we didn't mention that a lot of older people, they don't use a car. And I think that's why, because, for example, a lot of older ladies, they've never had a car, they don't have driving license, and now they are widows, and they cannot drive, and they won't learn because it's not like it's not in like the reach of them. So they also like with this exclusion in the transport is also really important that it like the most excluded people are older people, women sometimes even more, and also like when also children, they don't have the driving license, of course, so they don't have parents which have the car or which can have the time and can afford to get the children in any place. It also affects children with, for example, going to the schools or choosing high school, depending on the way to the school. And with this, our region with Silesia, it's comparing, I guess, comparing to other countries or Panama, I think it's well connected as far as I understood. But compared to Warsaw, it's poor. But now when I'm living in Warsaw like 3 years, for me, poor connection is when I have to wait 10 or 20 minutes. That's for me poor connection because I'm used to having bus in any 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And for me now waiting 10 minutes, sometimes on Sunday, buses go not so often. And when I have to like wait 10 minutes, I'm like, oh no. And when the tram, like when I have to wait on traffic lights like 2 minutes and my tram is going, I'm like, oh no. And then I have to wait like 2 minutes for the next one in the peak hours. So I think we are really comparing it from different perspective because communication, we are complaining on the words of communication because there are some districts who are less connected, but it's not bad connected. Like, of course, with car, it will be easier to get from one district on the northeast to west south district or something, but it will be not impossible. It will be easy comparing to, for example, countryside or even other cities like my district, which is rather well connected. We have trams, we have buses, we have trains, and also we have funny bus, like it's called trolleybus. I don't know how it's in other languages because it's really strange because it's like mixed of bus, but it's connected to rails like tram. I don't know how, like it's only in 2 or 3 cities in Poland, but we have the communication, and I think the most important is that in Warsaw the communication is really good, and in other cities there is normal communication. In other like voivodeship cities, I guess it's also like buses, very often trams, and the main station or sometimes few stations. For example, in Lublin, they also have buses and these trolley buses, trains. So even we are complaining, comparing Warsaw to other cities, even other cities are good enough, even if it's easier with cars, because we have like Dorota said, we have really good ways, like not highways, but this well-connected ways for cars, and it's easier, but the bus is also possible. So like in Warsaw, the communication is really well developed, and like complaining about buses being like 1 in 10 minutes, we are doing this because we are really used by living here, we are really used to having good communication, which is really affordable. That's also, I think, important, like especially in Warsaw, the bus card for student for 3 months, it's really cheap. And in Poland in general, trains are affordable, depending on like this quick one, which Jan said, the Pendolino train, they are expensive, but it's not impossible to buy them. Especially these trains are more for not this daily commune, but and some longer trips or
I can't hear you, Aldona. Maybe somebody else can hear Aldona or not really?
I don't hear her.
Okay. Okay, so I don't know. Do you have internet? I mean, your connection is good or not really?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Better?
Yes, so I think I'm finished. Yes, with these trains. Yes, so like, and also I wanted to add that, for example, even small villages or like touristic places, like for example, I don't know, seaside or some more touristic places not in the cities are you can go there in this high season, like in the summertime. It's possible. There are some buses. It's not always easy, but it's possible. And you almost always have some way to get somewhere. So that's, I think it's the remain topic which is getting on like over and over, that we sometimes would rather use a car, but we can use something else. And I think that's the biggest difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Aldona. And I can see that Janek is holding his hand. So maybe it's your turn.
Also, two things. One thing I would also like to second what Aldona said about the transport in Warsaw. For example, the beautiful thing about the subway trains is that they don't have the problem with traffic congestions. So whatever happens on the ground, whether there's traffic or not, they don't. It's not a problem for them, and they usually in the kind of more working hours. There's a train every 4 minutes, so they are a great option, and many of those trains are very new. And another thing that I would also like to add in terms of the topic of cars is like Ambar also mentioned about cars in Panama, that they make things very comfortable for people. I think it's also for many people and for a certain generation of people in Poland, cars are also a certain symbol of, let's say, just mobility and independence, right? They can get anywhere, especially if those are people who grew up, for example, in the 80s, 90s, when they also in the 80s, especially in the socialist times, where it was also difficult to, for example, get out of Poland, to other countries, right? And right now, with Poland being part of the European Union, for example, it's also much easier for people, let's say, to get from Poland to Germany for, I don't know, a weekend trip to Berlin if you live, I don't know, in Poznań, which is quite close to that area. But another problem with cars, I think, and maybe somebody will follow up more on that, is the problem that cars also have cause another issue, for example, in big cities, is that they need parking spaces. And parking spaces in Poland are a problem for the fact that many big Polish cities, especially after 1989, where many green areas are being occupied by concrete, for example, by parking spaces, right? And this is also a thing that I've noticed that is problematic with individual transport. Is that there is, for example, many very nice areas that have been sacrificed for the purpose of having having a car park. It's a bit of an American thing, I guess. I don't know if this has also occurred in Panama or not, but I think we have that contrast, especially in Poland, where, for example, in the 80s, the cars were not that popular, and suddenly in the 90s or the 2000s, car parks started appearing, and sometimes having a negative influence on the local, let's say, architecture and the local space and how it's occupied. It's generally a bit of a smaller problem, but it's also a part of what we call, for example, betonoza in Poland, the focus on turning many areas into areas occupied by concrete.
Yeah, it's definitely try to agree with Janek. And well, I want to ask if we still have questions or maybe some comments, because if not, I think that we can discuss. Okay, I can see your hand, Amber, and then I will end my speech. Okay, Amber.
Thank you. I was just gonna say that it is a very American thing to have a very car-centric society, but then not plan for where to park the cars. It's a very weird thing that happens in Panama. And maybe taking a little bit of what Aldona said earlier. Is she still here? I don't see her. Well, when she said earlier that Warsaw and her city at least are very interconnected through public transport systems, that's very interesting. And one thing I have noticed with Panama is previously, before the emergence of this car-centric type of way of living, Panama was even smaller than it is today. It's very small, and then it was just like 5 streets you could go through. So a lot of people just walked, and there was a time when around the historic district of Panama, there was a tram system that went all the way across. I think if you went there, you could see the line, the rails in the ground. It disappeared. I don't know exactly for what reason, because that's much better for that type of narrow streets. A lot of Panama could really benefit from that specific type of transport, and there are a lot of people pushing for these new, well, for initiatives to take back these kinds of methods to ease the traffic jams and to also promote the economic activity from local communities, because a lot of the problems that Panama has today, and Panama City has today, with very concentrated economic areas, is that it's not really sustainable. It's very much, here is where people live, here people go to shop, and here to walk around, but it's not really, we've lost a lot of third spaces, so to speak, around the main, around the crossroads of the 3 main roads that I mentioned, the Cinco de Mayo area. And we could really benefit from taking some ideas from Polish intercity transport systems. Just saying.
Yeah, I think that's, well, sharing our experience from Panama and Poland, it is really beneficial because you can see other, well, let's say, solutions and opportunities. So it's really, really great. And I think that, well, our discussion today has showed us that topics which can be, let's say, interesting to us. First of all, can be topic of environment and nature, because, well, you mentioned about that Panama is perceived as a country which is, let's say, green in the region. So I think that this topic can be interesting to us. And another thing which, well, right now I can recognize as something which we were talking about was a topic about, let's say, cities and urbanization, how our cities are designed and organized. So I think that it could be interesting to us as another topic. So maybe, well, if somebody has still a question or comments, you can share with them with us now. If not, I think that we can talk a little bit about topic of our another meeting, which I think that we'll do in August, in 1 month. So so I will ask one more time, if somebody has a question or comment, it's the best time, or maybe, let's say, the last opportunity to share with us. If not, I can see. Okay, so I think that we can talk about another topic. So what do you think as more, let's say, interesting to us? Something about environment, or maybe something about cities, because I can see that we are talking about it. So what do you think is more interesting?
I believe maybe you should choose this time because the other time we were the ones who chose about transportation.
And we also wanted, well, this time we didn't include this topic, but the last time we talked a bit about the identity. And we thought that it could be really interesting to share thoughts about what does it mean to be a Polish or Panamanian. So I don't know if that is interesting for you.
Well, that is definitely interesting in general because, as we mentioned in the last session, we do have a very weird identity in Panama. So if that interests you and you want that to be the topic, you can also tell us about that. We probably won't mind. We will prepare something depending on which of the 3 topics it is.
Yes, I think we would rather begin with this topic and later come back to all the environmental things. Dorota, what do you think?
Yes, of course, we can do it like this. Of course. Not a
It's
problem.
also-
I mean that it's, let's say, our seminar, so where we can choose what our Polish Panama group wants. So, of course, we can do it.
I would also add that it's a good idea because, like Claudia said, it was discussed previously. There's many aspects to it because there's historical aspects, social aspects, religious aspects, aspects of race, things like that. And also, I think when I don't know what's the impression of the other members of our Polish group, but when we were in Panama, I think it was also interesting to see, for example, how totally different the Panamanian identity and the way of forming it is, and what are the aspects constituting it, even compared to, for example, other Latin American countries. So that will be also very interesting, I think. So yeah, the national identity idea is very good, very good.
Okay, so I think we all agree for this topic. Okay. So I think that we can, well, end our session for today, not to prolong it too much. So thank you one more time for attending our seminar, for presentations. Janek, Ambar, your presentation were really, really great. And I am really happy that another time we had this brilliant opportunity to share our thoughts, ideas, like this. So I think that we can end for today. And